Am I the jerk for kicking out my pregnant girlfriend? I once dated a girl who completely turned my life upside down. At first, it felt like the best relationship I'd ever had. We seemed perfect for each other. Our dreams, goals, and even our sense of humor aligned. We could spend hours laughing, sharing thoughts about the future, and imagining what our life together would look like in a few years. It felt like a fairy tale I never thought I'd experience. Our nights were especially magical. We'd sit on the balcony with tea or wine, gaze at the stars, and talk about everything in the world. She shared childhood memories, stories about her friends, work, and dreams. I listened, mesmerized by her view of the world. There was something magical in her words that made me believe I could achieve anything with her by my side. She inspired me to be better, stronger, and happier. But after a few months, things began to change. At first, I barely noticed that. They seemed like small details. She became more withdrawn and sometimes avoided eye contact during important conversations. People get tired or need time for themselves, so I didn't think much of it. Gradually, her behavior started to raise questions. She often talked about new emotions, freedom, and finding herself. These phrases felt abstract, and I avoided digging into their meaning. I thought everyone sometimes feels the need for change or inspiration. I didn't want to believe it could mean something deeper. Yet every time she repeated these phrases, something inside me tightened. If only I could have foreseen what it would lead to, maybe I would have acted differently. One conversation changed everything. It was an ordinary evening. We were watching a movie and joking about the funny moments. Suddenly, she changed the topic. Her voice grew serious, and she asked me to listen. She said she wanted to discuss something that had been bothering her for a long time, but that she was afraid to bring up. I felt my smile fade as my heart began to race. A million scenarios ran through my mind about what she might say. What she said shocked me. She suggested we try an open relationship. At that moment, I literally stopped breathing. Her words sounded completely absurd. She tried to convince me that it wasn't just a whim, but a way to strengthen our relationship. Open relationships, she said, would allow us to preserve our love while letting her feel free. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. To me, it felt like betrayal. How could someone love another person and simultaneously want to be with others? I couldn't wrap my head around it, but I didn't want to lose her. I was torn between agreeing to this experiment and breaking up. I felt that either choice would bring pain. I tried to find a compromise that would give us a chance to stay together. After much thought, I proposed a condition. If she wanted an open relationship, I would choose who she could see. To my surprise, she agreed. A few months passed. I tried not to show how much doubt and jealousy consumed me. During that time, I literally handpicked a few people for her, men I deemed safe. They were polite, calm, and seemed no threat to me. But every time I saw her with them, it ate me up inside. Every meeting, every smile on their faces felt like a stab to my heart. But I endured it. I told myself I was doing this for her, for our happiness. When she came home after these meetings, she acted as if nothing had happened. She talked about ordinary things as if our life was the same as before. But I couldn't forget where she'd been or with whom. Each time I wondered if this pain was worth it. 6 months passed, and I was barely holding on. Every time she went out for another meeting, I felt something inside me break. She didn't even seem to notice how it was affecting me. For her, it was just emotional exploration, as she called it. But for me, it was so much more. It was a slow erosion of the trust and love I once felt for her. I hated the moments when she came back home after her dates. She'd walk in, smiling as if nothing had happened, and start talking about everyday things. How she needed new shoes, how a new project had started at work, or about a new series she thought we should watch together. I'd just sit there, staring at her, trying to find the strength to respond. Every word she said echoed in my mind with one thought. What was she doing 2 hours ago? Does she even need me at all? Things got worse when she started justifying why these dates were important to her. She said it was a way to better understand herself, her desires, and her values. But how could I believe that when I saw how happy she seemed with them? She explained that she loved me, that I was her stability and security. But how could I feel like her rock when other men so easily took my place by her side? She insisted it wasn't cheating, that physical intimacy wasn't the point for her, but rather a way to expand her emotional world. But wasn't this betrayal? How could she justify dividing her feelings between multiple people? The hardest moments were when I met the men she was seeing. They always seemed polite, friendly, even slightly awkward. I tried to keep it together, smiled at them, even pretended to be interested in small talk. But inside, I was boiling. A lump would rise in my throat every time one of them extended a hand for a handshake. I could see it in their eyes, what they must have been thinking. How did he even agree to this? That thought destroyed me. In those moments, I hated myself. I hated myself for letting her convince me this was a good idea. I hated myself for not having the courage to say no from the start. But most of all, I hated her. I hated her for acting so calm and carefree, as if nothing was wrong. Her smile after those dates was the hardest blow. She could so easily come home, hug me, and talk about how wonderful her day had been. And there I was, standing next to her, feeling like the most pathetic person alive. One day I decided to have a serious conversation with her. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know why she kept going on these dates if she claimed to love me. She stayed silent for a long time before saying that these relationships gave her something she lacked in ours. She didn't specify what, but those words cut deep. For the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't the one who could make her happy. But then something happened that I thought would be our salvation. One evening, she told me she was pregnant. At first, I couldn't believe my ears. The news felt like a gift from fate. I was happy because I thought everything would change now. I imagined her focusing on motherhood, our relationship growing stronger. I dreamed of us decorating a nursery together, choosing a name for our child. I genuinely believed this would mark a new chapter in our lives. However, reality turned out to be very different. Instead of cutting down on her outings, she started disappearing even more frequently. Her excuses became increasingly absurd. She claimed it was hormones, that she needed support and attention from different people. I tried to hold on, hoping this was just a temporary phase, but with each passing day, my patience wore thinner. One evening, she came home much later than usual. She wasn't tired, as she typically was, but strangely cheerful. Her mood threw me off. I asked where she had been, but her answers were so vague and detached that I felt she wasn't even trying to convince me. It was the first warning sign that something was seriously wrong. The next day, I accidentally found a receipt from a cafe she had never mentioned before. The date matched the evening she had stayed out late. This place was in a completely different part of town, and I started wondering why she hadn't told me about it. Normally, we shared these little details. I began to think, what else was she hiding? After the receipt incident, I started paying more attention to her behavior. The more I observed, the more troubling details I noticed. Her phone, which used to always be left out in plain sight, was now almost always with her. She wouldn't leave it behind, even when going to another room. Her best friend, who she used to chat with for hours, often called when we were together, and my girlfriend never answered. She would just glance at the screen and wave it off with, "It's nothing important. I'll call back later." These moments felt so unnatural that my doubts only grew stronger. One night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the little changes in her behavior lately. It felt like puzzle pieces coming together to form a picture I didn't like. Her absences, the cafe receipt, strange calls, the tension in her voice. It all gave the impression that she was hiding something. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to find out the truth. While she was sleeping soundly next to me, I took her phone. It was the first time in our relationship I had ever done something like that. My heart was racing, and my hands were trembling. I knew what I was doing was a violation of trust, but I also felt I had the right to know what was going on. The phone was locked, but I knew her password. I entered it and opened her recent call list. There were several numbers that appeared too often. One of them was saved as Sophia. That surprised me because I distinctly remembered her friend's name was different. I decided to investigate the number. First, I compared it with contacts I had from before. It didn't match her friend's number, which only deepened my suspicions. So I used an online service to search for information about the number. What I found shocked me. The number didn't belong to a woman, but to a man. His name didn't ring any bells, but this discovery was enough to make everything start falling into place. The worst was yet to come. I opened her Messenger app and found a hidden conversation with this man. It was stored in a special folder she had clearly tried to hide from me. Their messages were too warm, sometimes even intimate. They joked about how long she could keep everything a secret and discussed details of their future meetings. I felt a crushing weight on my chest. But the real blow came when I saw a photo in their chat. The photo showed her with this man. He had his arms around her stomach, and they both looked happy. The caption beneath it said everything, "Can't wait for our baby." Those words were like a knife to my heart. Everything I had tried to justify or ignore now appeared as obvious lies. I could no longer convince myself it was just my imagination or an overreaction. I sat there holding her phone, trying to process what I'd seen. My mind was in chaos. How could she lie to me so easily while looking me straight in the eye? How could she pretend everything was fine when, in reality, our entire story had been a sham? It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. All my dreams, all the plans I had made for our future together, now felt like empty illusions. I put the phone back in its place and sat in the dark, trying to compose myself. Only one question echoed in my mind: what now? For the first time in our relationship, I felt that I couldn't take it anymore. The truth, no matter how painful, was more important than anything else. I decided that in the morning I would tell her everything I felt. I couldn't live in this farce any longer. Morning came, but I didn't start the conversation. She acted calm and even cheerful as always. I was struck by how effortlessly she could continue playing her role, but I didn't want to create a scene. I decided to think it through first: how to tell her I knew, how to stay in control, and most importantly, what to do next. That moment marked the point of no return for me. I understood that the truth had shattered our life together, but it also gave me a chance to start anew. The following days were a real test. I tried to act as if nothing had happened, but it was incredibly hard. She kept behaving as usual, while my anger and disappointment grew with every passing moment. I didn't know how to start the conversation, or if I could even find the words to express what I was feeling. But what tortured me most was the realization that everything we had built was just an illusion. She hadn't just betrayed me, she had destroyed my trust and belief in us. One evening I realized there was no point in enduring this any longer. We were having dinner and I could barely look at her. The photos, the messages, the moments I couldn't forget, they all kept spinning in my mind. She was saying something, but I wasn't listening. My focus was entirely on gathering the courage to start the conversation. I took a deep breath and said, "I need to talk to you." She immediately sensed something was wrong. Her smile faded, and she looked at me with mild concern. "What's going on?" she asked. I tried to speak calmly, but my voice trembled. I told her I knew about her messages, the man, the photos. Her expression changed. She looked puzzled but didn't deny it. In fact, she seemed almost relieved, as if she had been expecting this moment. "I wanted to tell you, but I was scared," she said softly. Her voice lacked any trace of remorse. She explained that the man had become a special friend to her, someone who supported her in difficult times. She tried to convince me that it had nothing to do with our relationship, that she still loved me. But her words felt empty. How could she talk about love when she had already betrayed me? I asked her directly, "The child, it's not mine, is it?" She didn't answer right away. She lowered her eyes and stayed silent. That pause was the worst moment of my life. She confirmed it with just a look, and everything became clear. All the things I had tried to justify or explain away over these months now stood out as blatant lies. It was pure betrayal, and I couldn't take it anymore. It took me a few minutes to figure out what to do next. I knew there was no point in staying, but I wasn't about to leave either. This was my home, my life, and I wasn't going to give it up to someone who had betrayed me. I stood up, looked her straight in the eye, and told her it was over and that she needed to pack her things. Her face went pale. She started to say something to explain, but I wasn't listening anymore. "You made this choice yourself. There's no place here for lies and betrayal," I said firmly. She tried to protest, assuring me she could fix everything, but I coldly pointed to the door. I no longer felt pity, only anger and a sense of liberation. That evening, she packed her belongings and left. When the door closed behind her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had done the right thing. It was hard, but I knew that keeping her around would only continue to destroy me. I chose truth and freedom over illusions and pain. Months have passed. I've started rebuilding my life. At first, it was difficult. Memories of her, of how it all began, of our dreams and plans, they haunted me. But with each passing day, I began to realize I had made the right choice. I started finding joy in the simple things I had once lost. I came to understand that love isn't just a feeling. It's trust, respect, and mutuality. Without those, a relationship has no meaning. Now, I can say that the experience made me stronger. It taught me to value myself and my emotions. I know now that I will never again allow myself to be in a relationship that destroys me. I'm grateful for the lesson, even though it was a painful one. Life goes on, and I believe something better awaits me in the future. Do you think I made the right decision? Write what your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe